Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. And so, first of all, in relation to, I believe it was my last Dave Barry book, I have to indicate an erratum. That is, I had said that Dave Barry's career didn't really properly take off until he moved to Miami. That would appear to have been wholly proved wrong by this book that I only just reread recently. And this is the book in which he is. This is a collection of his various. Of a bunch of his columns, because of course many of his columns are done in this. And this is a book that was published officially. Its publication date is 1987, with essays and or articles from 1982, 83, and 85. And this particular, and so, oh no, here we go. First published in hardcover in 85. So the thing about this is that several of the columns in this are not, there are not from somebody who's living in Miami, and I have to assume that he moved to Miami when he started working at the Miami Herald. This is that several of these he talks about his wife and himself living in Pennsylvania. And if he's living in Pennsylvania, that means that this is before he moved to Miami, and thus his career must have taken off before Miami. So there you go. I was wrong, and any rabid Dave Barry fans out there who, actually noticed that, good for you. You can yell at me later. Not that you'll have wound up watching this, because I'm not going to bother to go back and try to figure out how to put a correction into the other video, because I don't edit videos. And since they took away notations in YouTube, I can't even do that anymore, which is kind of annoying, actually. And, I mean, who actually reads the author's notes, the comments below? I mean, nobody reads the description. Anyways. So this is a collection of his just various articles that he's posted over time. And as I said, this one dates back to the early to mid-'80s. One of the things in this is I had mentioned when I was reading Babies and Other Hazards of Sex in the last one of his books that I did, I mentioned that that the books that are thematic, like cyberspace, like Guide to Guys, and like Babies and Other Hazards of Sex, that those come from specific columns. Well, here we go. This is the book which has the columns that are the basis of Babies and Other Hazards of Sex. Two of the columns that he's put in here are very, very clearly indicating that male delivery room, for one, Great Baby Delicious, Breasts and Baby Care, Sue It Won't Do It. I believe Sue It Won't Do It. These are articles that you can see are direct precursors of Babies and Other Hazards of Sex. And so it's always interesting when you read those, when you see the jokes that didn't make it into the final one and exactly where his expansion points were. However, Dave Barry's Bad Habits is, always just a collection of things that he wound up, writing about, various random bits and pieces him talking about how he and his wife don't or are somehow lacking, born without whatever brain part it is that enables people to decorate their homes. And, and him also talking about the fact that his wife believes that women are supposed to have this Betty Crocker gland somewhere that secretes a hormone that enables them to sew curtains. And of course, since I also lack that key chromosome or chemical secretion or something, and have a complete incapability of decorating with anything other than calendars with pictures of cats on them that I have chopped up and used in lieu of having actual posters. And given that I am ostensibly an adult, the fact that my room is just pasted with, cats is really kind of sad. But, that's how I decorate. So, what I like about this particular one is just, this is, I think, in a way, less of a time capsule than some of his books. Some of his books really, really have a kind of a time capsule feel to them that you sort of, when you read Dave Barry in Cyberspace, that really, really feels in its way like a time capsule, precisely because it's coming at a particular point in the development of both computers and the internet, and you can see all of the points where things were once the same and where things are different. This one, while there are some things that, there are some things in there that may be dated, such as his complaints about the fact that at some point in the 1980s, appliance plugs changed. If you're not old enough to remember this, then, fine, but I'm old enough to have caught the tail end of it, because there was a time in the universe when appliance plugs all had only 2 prongs, and those prongs were both exactly the same size. And then all of a sudden they started manufacturing 3-pronged ones, and they started manufacturing them with 1 prong larger than the other one. And all of a sudden people had to start sticking adapters into their old their old electrical outlets in order to just plug in like a clock radio, because they decided that they were going to change this. Now, there are perfectly good scientific safety reasons for 3-pronged plugs for grounding, and for these 2-pronged plugs to have an appropriate, correct side that they're supposed to go on, to ensure that, the alternating current flow going into things is going correctly and all of that. I get it, but there is a certain aggravation that comes from suddenly discovering that you literally can no longer plug something into your wall. That you have a brand new thing that you can't plug in because your plug, because the plug has a larger thing and the outlet doesn't have a slightly larger one for you to fit it. Or, you have a plug that has the 2 equal ones and it's sort of loose in the socket or whatever. Or the also aggravating 3-pronged plug where you can't actually plug it in because you don't have a 3-pronged plug. That's something that has of course started to go away, except in much, much older houses. But I'm old enough to remember having some of these frustrations. I'm not old enough for, to have the complaint that I had a normal God-fearing home with a normal God-fearing electrical system. I'm not quite that old, but I'm old enough to remember this change. And so you have some of these that kind of go out of the way on it, but there's a lot in here that is really very much unchanged. Talking about pets, talking about the fact that dogs are loyal, and when I say loyal I mean stupid, whereas cats are less loyal but more independent, which means cats are smarter than dogs but they hate people. I mean, you know, as I always say, that's how you tell the difference between cat people and dog people. Cat people think that the fact that cats look down on you and are just waiting for you to feed them and want everything done at their convenience is exactly why a cat person likes them, and it's exactly why a dog person hates them, and the dog's enthusiasm and great affection for their people is why dog people like their dogs and why cat people hate dogs. That's just a truism. The thing that, interestingly, of course, some of what he talks about when you've got the then current discussions of what then President Reagan was doing, when you're talking about French President Mitterrand and Margaret Thatcher in meetings, of course that dates itself because, there's no more Margaret Thatcher. The Japanese Prime Minister Nakasone is no longer Prime Minister. Mitterrand hasn't been president for decades, and so on and so forth. But the fact is, politics, putting aside the current American administration, which has been, quite frankly, a hopefully soon-to-be over-with blip, one kind of hopes for a reversion to standard politics, if only to be able to enjoy the predictability of how things function once more. You look at this, and the politics is ultimately the same. The details are different, but they're actually all the same. So while those, while the discussions of government or taxation or what have you, yes, they're sort of a moment out of time, at the same time you look at it and you say, yeah, but that's exactly the same as it's ever been. Which, I'll be honest, is, both depressing and good to know, and kind of relaxing that you can step from, one particular that you can step from one particular political situation to another and say the details are different but the beats are the same. This is also the one where he has his bit about the National Enquirer, where he talks about having taken up reading checkout counter publications. For example, a recent Enquirer issue contains a story headlined, "Whatever Happened to the Cast of The Flying Nun?" And the National Examiner, which is like the Enquirer except it uses even smaller words, "I would never have found out that 40 vampires roam North America." And he talks about he sent questionnaires to people who request mail from the center, the Vampire Research Center, and 40 responded that yes, indeed, they are vampires. So, I've always liked that article, and when he talks about other stories you missed, such as Bingo Can Restore the Will to Live On, $50 Operation to Restore Virginity, A Machine Chewed Up My Legs, Cancer Ruins Sex, Dead Man Thanks Killer, and 34 Years in a Haunted House. And of course he talks about all of those things that people claim cause violence in teenagers and children, which is, of course, mostly television and video games, and he disputes that television and video games causes violence, or rather he suggests, among other things, that perhaps TV causes violence by not having enough violence on television, so that people have to go out into the world and cause their own violence to get their daily doses of violence. Honestly, in a way, I think that may be more reliable than assuming that Grand Theft Auto causes violence. But, I mean, then again, I don't play Grand Theft Auto, so who knows? Maybe it does. Anyway, that's about all I have to say, because why would I say anything actually useful or concrete about this book? So that is everything, and I will see you all next week.